Okay, so there are three versions of this rear kick stretch. And climbing wise, I want you to think about it in terms of um, being able to fractal off momentum. So think like jumping, feet cutting, and being able to be a little bit more flexible and mobile mid-air so that you can roll that momentum off you. Um, Think like Yanya Garnbrett style. Okay, so the first one, still standing relatively tall. See how for the most part, um, really trying to keep the spine and the standing leg exactly the same throughout the stretch. Okay, and then we get to what the rear leg is doing. The goal in the rear leg, let's switch here. Okay, so the goal on the rear leg is that we're using momentum in that dynamic swing to feel a stretch along that red line. Okay, so that means front of the thigh a little bit and definitely the hip flexors. That's where we're trying to really target the stretch. And then for this one, you just make sure that standing leg toes are pointing forward, and when you extend it back, that the toe is also trying to point straight backwards. So straight forward, straight backwards, no turnout. So that's variation one. And when it comes to all of these, the goal for how to get our stretch, think about it as core bracing timing. So oftentimes when it comes to wanting to control ourselves mid-air, it's really about the exact timing with when we really squeeze the core instead of just keeping it on the whole time. So here, you can see starting the motion, I'm actually pawing the ground with that foot. And what that means is intentionally dragging the front part of the foot on the ground. So it's almost storing up, getting ready to supercharge off the floor. And then that way I accelerate into the motion. And just after I start, about halfway through the motion is when I actually want to start coring up and bracing really hard. Because that way, when the leg already has momentum and I'm pointing the toe, keeping the toe pointing exactly backwards, nothing else in the body can move. So the only part that can stretch is our target area. Okay, so that's that one. Now, this next variation, we're going for more maximum height. So we're actually involving, you can see the torso, instead of keeping it all straight, now we are, you can see here, actually extending down. So let's flip to a different color. So it's weird, but so much of the attention should be put actually into we're trying to go from the blue line to the yellow line. And then here, what you'll notice, toes pointing forward. So rather, this foot, toes are pointing forward the whole time. And then this foot, we actually want to start turning out. And you can kind of see. So actually, the kneecap is facing the camera directly, but then this kneecap and toe are facing forward into the box directly. So we're opening up the hips a little bit, which is difficult to see from this angle. And then the pro tip here for how to get that maximum kick, because we're doing our best to get flexible, more and more flexible to get that in a straight line. So really my goal would actually be to go here. But ultimately, the key here is once you start the motion, you set the motion exactly the same. I'm pawing the ground, not squeezing my core fully yet. And then when I'm really flinging here, and this is where I'm using the back side of the legs and the lower back to really accelerate that leg upwards, this is where the biggest trick is to actually, when you dip the torso forward, right? So we're going from there, dipping it forward, what you're actually trying to do is shove your hips backwards. So it's actually easier to think about this as a hamstring stretch for the front or the standing leg, which is a little tricky. Um, so, bam, right? So, start that motion. So the left leg is already starting to fling momentum. And then you can watch as I'll shove. It's a little hard to tell, so I'll just draw this line so it's a little easier to tell. So this is where left hip is, or I'm sorry, right hip is now. And see how I'm actually trying to shove that hip backwards, right? So by shoving the hip backwards, by stretching into the hamstrings of that leg, it actually can help us trick this leg into going even further. Okay, so that's that version. And then the final one is a little bit more, that's not the final version. The final one is a little bit more intuitive in terms of obviously what kind of climbing situation we want to be able to do, right? So it's hard from this angle to see, but the way that we're kicking is in this looping pattern, slicing the air in a corkscrew with the heel. But here I'm actually trying to point the toe as well because I'm really trying to get maximum length that way. Okay. And so again, the key here, in order to get the most exaggerated range of motion out of the leg that's kicking, we pay attention to, what kind of leaning or what's happening in the standing leg. In this case, it's pretty much the same as that previous one where it's shoving backwards a little bit. And then the other thing is at what point in this range do you max tighten the core, like snap, like really quick core activation? Play with the timing of when to activate the core within this motion. So every rep could be a different micro beta. And then what you'll end up finding is that some of the time you'll feel a much better stretch. And so what's difficult to tell here is that this foot at the end is way outside um, of the right shoulder. So if you were standing here looking that way, your point of view would be, here's my head and here's my foot coming over here, like the ultimate scorpion back flag. So that is a little gist on those beginning ones and the reason that we'll plan to start there. And again, you can see that arcing motion. That's why I'm stepping oops, it's the wrong one. That's why that left foot starts not only forward or in front of the other foot, but also outside. And so that way it can get this big corkscrewing loop all the way over. And the big gist is that the goal is to really start activating the backside of the body and the backside of the legs and lower back. And start to loosen up the front side of the body so it's more willing to scrunch up and work on the next few.